Good morning, my creative friends, and welcome. This is Dr. Minette Riordan, and we are here for another session of Painting in Your PJs with Minette. This is the place where we gather to talk about all things life, love, art, creative inspiration. And I'd love for you to just grab some supplies and play along with me with whatever you're working on. It doesn't necessarily need to be the same thing that I'm doing, but just come along for the creative conversation and the journey that we're playing on together. And I am super passionate about helping people in midlife really reconnect to their sense of identity and purpose. And I started reading this really fabulous book this morning called Inspired by a New York Times Pulitzer Prize winning journalist whose name I'm not remembering at this very second, but we'll share it another time. And he was talking about why we're afraid of creativity. And it's because it makes us question our very identity. Creativity makes us question our very identity. We're often afraid of our own ideas or afraid of the call to create. And so it's really important. Am I doing this right? Nope, I am not. It's really important to think about the connection between creativity and identity, and what does it mean to be a creative person. And so much of that journey, and he references this in the book as well, is about authenticity and having the courage to authentically express our own voice. And this is one of those soapboxes that I love to stand on, is about the benefit and value of really sitting in our own creative journey and finding what is that most authentic expression. Just changing some things up on my screen here. The most authentic expression of our creative voice. And then what are the tools that can help us to get comfortable with that creative expression, that authentic creative expression. So, welcome, my friends. Again, this is Dr. Minette. This is Painting in Your PJs with Minette. And what I'm doing here in the background is I'm talking about creative expression and inspiration. Is I am completing this little mini deck of oracle cards, if you will, that I started yesterday. So I've been really sitting with this idea of the word of the year that I chose, which is compassionate action, compassionate action. And what does that mean? And how will I live that? It's so easy to just pick a word and to going through lots of glue sticks this morning. It's so easy to pick a word and then to forget that word, or really not consider how are we going to live that word? How is that word going to stay present and top of mind? So I keep sitting with this question of how will I remember? And so one of my closest friends came over for a creative play date, and I showed her what I was working on. And we had a lot of fun developing mind maps around our word of the year. Blanca, good morning, my friend. And we got out some bigger sheets of paper and we dug really deep into what happens if we create a mind map with our word of the year in the center, and then almost looking at, as if it's a wheel of life, the key areas for growth and focus for our lives going forward. And so we looked at health, money, faith, spirituality, adventure, creativity, relationships. Community and collaboration are important to both of us, personal development and service. And so we looked at how would compassionate action, or her word of the year was enjoy, how would this support us how would our word of the year support us in each of these particular areas? And so it got me really thinking about, this idea of creating this little deck of cards that will support me going forward. So yesterday, in part one of the video, I just took a set of index cards and sorry, little froggy first thing in the morning, getting my voice warmed up. I tried to warm it up before I got on, but we had a lot of fun painting, doing just some abstract painting on this set of index cards. I started with black gesso to kind of create this sort of moody effect. You can see that video from yesterday on the recordings of the live videos. And then I took a series of our sacred circles from our Mindful Patterns membership that I had colored over time over the last few months, and I cut those up to create the backs. One, because they're beautiful, two, because I have stacks of them and I love to repurpose my art, and three, because I'm working on index cards. Adding these double layers really helps to make those layers or to make the cards stand up a little bit better. And I do want these cards to last across time. You could do this with just gluing two index cards, painting extras and gluing them back to back. So you create some little bit thicker. You could do it by adding collage materials to the index cards as well. And so I just used my paper cutter to trim these up to the same size. These are little 3x5 index cards. And now I'm just using a glue stick to adhere those, making sure I get that glue all along, especially the edges, and really burnishing them down to make sure they're stick together. The first couple I did, I was finding that they weren't sticking together as well as I was like, and sometimes with glue stick, you just need to get a little heat in there and really rub those down a little bit. So now I have this set of cards that I've created. Some of them need to be trimmed up a little bit. And yesterday I had done some journaling. So here's the side with the sacred circle mandala designs. These are ones that I colored. I cut them to fit. And then these are the painted sides. So I have two beautiful sides that I'm really going to enjoy looking at. I love creating my own sets of oracle or inspiration cards. And I want to talk today about how I might use these going forward, other than just having fun creating them. And, yes, they're very pretty. I don't feel like they're quite done. So I'm going to maybe get my Posca markers out and just have some fun adding some marks and patterns to these to play a little bit, as well as the words. So when I was thinking about compassionate action, I started to think about what do I need in order to support compassionate action. So, what would support me and what do I mean by compassionate action, which is my sort of word or phrase of the year? And so, to me, compassionate action means being careful with my choices, making sure that any action that I am taking is guided by compassion. And that includes compassion for self as well as compassion for others. As a wife, a mom, a daughter, a sister, a citizen of the United States, a member of my local community, my actions can have an impact on others as a business owner, as a leader in networking communities. There's a lot of places where my actions have an impact. And so I always want to be present to, am I acting from a place of compassion first to myself and then to others? Am I acting with kindness? And I'm going to show how I would use these words to sort of guide my process through journaling and inquiry to just be curious about, how can I act with more compassion today? Or what area of my life could use a little emphasis on compassionate action? And so I came up with this list of 10 words, and it may not be a complete list, but I can always go back anytime and add to my deck. But I want to create this little deck and then show you what I would do with it. So going forward from here, so making sure I cut out all of my words here. And I just used Canva and a font that I thought was pretty to create my list of words, printed them out, and am going to adhere them to the cards. And one of my questions was, what side of the cards do I want to put these on? And yesterday I thought I might want to put them on this side, but today I'm really leaning towards the painty side of having this kind of be the working side. I really love that. So I'm going to go ahead and stick all of these words down on here. And then my favorite part of creating these little cards is some of those final touches of adding smaller marks, details, and additional colors using gel pens or paint markers. I'm going to be using paint markers this morning. I love paint markers. I like those triangles going up, and I think I want all the words to be at the bottom. I love having the symmetry of that. Sometimes when I create decks, I definitely have the words in different places. And this is a fun activity to do. You could use index cards like I did. You could repurpose art that you've already created, do it all with collage. Old decks of playing cards are great. If you cover them really well with gesso, you can create your own set of cards using old playing cards. And I don't know about you guys, but from when my kids were little, they always seem to be, losing a card at a two in a deck. And we probably all have a couple of decks of cards lying around that are missing a card or two. Don't toss them out. They make great cards for creating art on top of. And the thing I didn't do that I kind of wanted to do was to add some stitching to these. So that will happen on another day. And I made some more cards with my friend that was here yesterday. And one of the things we decided was, as we were working on our mind map, that we really wanted to make cards to honor all the different aspects of our lives we're focusing our word of the year on. So, making one for health, making one for money, making one for spirituality. And if we could make a card to honor those areas, that would be really cool as well. So, we started, so much glue on my under peeper here now. It's getting sticky. And maybe I will add some stitching on top of those, which would be super fun. My newsprint has gotten really sticky, sticky. Okay, so let's just get some glue on these, get all of these stuck down. And I realize what's missing here for my deck is a cover card that actually says compassionate action on it. So I definitely want to create some kind of a cover for this deck. And these words are great for all day, any day. And I'm actually going to, let's see, I have a piece of scratch paper here. All right, we're just going to stick that down on there until that glue dries. So here I have created all the concepts that I think are going to help me live in compassionate action. So respect, simplicity, loving kindness, connectedness, openness, choice, remembering that I have a choice. That can be really challenging when we're feeling stressed out or overwhelmed, but having the belief that we get to choose in any moment is really powerful. Discernment, like really listening, going into deep reflection, deep connection to self, can allow me to be in a place of discernment to make better choices. Openness to new ideas, to input, to feedback. Congruence, making sure that I'm aligned at the level of my head, my heart, and my gut when I am making decisions. Feeling aligned is also a path to compassionate action, feeling like I'm bringing the best of me and all of me and the truth of me forward. And then paying attention to the direction that I'm going, and is it the direction that I want to go? So I'm loving this little deck of cards, and they don't feel quite done yet. So I am going to spread them out and grab some Posca markers and just have a little fun adding some additional marks to personalize these and create a little more visual interest on the page. And I have a giant box of Posca markers because I've collected them. I've had friends give some to me. A friend of mine decided she didn't love them, and so I became the beneficiary of a bunch of them. So grabbing just a few bright colors here. Let's see what we can do to just continue to maybe brighten these up a little bit. That one isn't open, so let's maybe try that one. And I usually will just start with one color and then add marks across. I would do this if I was working in a journal spread or working on these individual cards. And just noticing this color feels maybe a little too similar to some of the blue that's on there. So where is that color going to show up best? Definitely against that black. And just adding some different shapes, some different marks, just giving those little pops of color. Just makes them feel a little more personalized, just a little more playful. And again, we talked a little bit in yesterday's video about starting to curate a dictionary of marks, starting to curate a dictionary of your own marks. What are the lines, the shapes, the circles that you feel drawn to over and over again? So there's a few different ones that seem to show up in my work over and over again. Some of those inspired and influenced by my Zentangle practice. Let's see. So X's, circles, triangles, squares, straight lines, curved lines. What are the things that you find yourself drawing over and over again? And this is a really fun practice to do just in a journal, is just to start creating your own dictionary of marks. And Blanca, thank you so much for signing up for the Radiant Retreat. I'm super excited to get to spend some time with you in a couple of weeks, or in about a week. So again, just having some fun, looking for places where can I just add some little pops of color, a little more variety in shape. So when I look at these cards, they have a lot of big detail, big area of color. And so I'm just coming in and thinking about where can I add some visual interest by creating some smaller, different shapes. So this one doesn't have any crosses on it. So maybe we can come in here and just, again, adding some pops of color. I'm staying more or less in the same palette that I started with. And I love big dots, small dots. I love these sort of scallop half circle shapes. And what happens if I add clusters of tiny dots in and around those bigger dots? So differences in size and shape create visual interest in our art. Some of the principles of design. Bring some of that yellow back to those squares. And again, just little clusters of dots are one of my favorite things to draw. They end up being in a lot of my art. So I'm liking these triangles. I'm going to bring those triangles back. And this almost looks like maybe a bigger triangle on there. And this is a place that I can spend a lot of time in abstract play. It's very calming, like Zentangle, to just sit in this space of mark making and creative play. Outlining other shapes that are already on the page. And again, just noticing how just these little pops of color, especially this nice bright pink, they really sort of just brighten up the whole card. So I'm not trying to add anything specific. I am not really thinking about what I'm doing. I'm just having some fun adding shape and color. And adding the marks to this page to the top the way that I'm doing somehow makes these feel complete to me where they didn't feel complete before. So when I look at what's missing, it felt like what's missing was just some of this detail work and this variation in size. Variation in size. And part of me is wanting to maybe outline these words a little bit and just make them pop a little more. And I have discovered at altitude that these Posca markers can be a little finicky, especially when they're getting near to the end. And so I try not to activate them directly onto my surface unless I want to get some big blobs of paint on there. Got some bigger ovals on here, kind of using some of the shapes that are on here, looking at what shapes aren't on here that are on the other ones. Using different sizes of pen nibs, right? The Poscas and other paint markers, they come in a variety of sizes. And so even just working with some different nib sizes, tip sizes, also creates some difference on the page. So this one is a little bit finer than some of the other ones. Again, I'm repeating shapes. They're all, you can tell which shapes that I love because they tend to show up on all of my cards. Again, not being too particular with how I'm outlining the words. I've got closed circles. Now I've added some open circles. I can go in and outline shapes that are already here, make them stand out more, or repeat them. And I'm moving the color around generally in at least three different places. So one of the things that helps your piece feel cohesive when you're working in abstract is repetition is one of the principles of design. And so you want your shapes to repeat. They can be different sizes. But you want to repeat shapes and color in different places around the page. And this helps the viewer's eye to see the consistency and feel like the piece is cohesive, like all the pieces are really playing together. All the pieces are really playing together. And even with the Posca markers, I have still stayed in kind of my same primary color palette. I used basically the same colors that I did with the underpainting, and it wasn't necessarily intentional, but I used that same pink and a yellow and the blue, which are basically, here's my blue, this is my red, and my yellow. So I'm still staying in that same primary palette that I worked in all month. I can't believe it's the end of December already. So I'm celebrating the end of my first month of this YouTube live series. And I'm excited about where we're going next. So in January, I will be working in a new format. I haven't quite decided what I want that format to be yet, so I will reveal that next Monday when I'm back live. But our theme is going to be archetypes, story, and myth. Archetypes, story, and myth. And we're going to be looking at how archetypes influence our life, but also how they can show up in our art as well. So I'm feeling like the last thing these guys need is a little touch of white on here. Especially this one is feeling kind of just blobby over here. So I'm going to come in and just, there were some X's in there, maybe bring those back. It doesn't need a lot of white, but just breaking up maybe some of those big areas of color. Again, continuing to just use those same marks and lines that I've been using, but there's nothing like a pop of white to really make a piece feel finished and complete, to feel finished and complete. Some of these have more white on them than others. Some of them still maybe need to be trimmed up a little bit. Maybe even coming in and just adding, whitening up some of those white spots. Coming in with some bigger lines. And just allowing yourself to have fun and play. This is how we grow and learn as artists, is through deep play and experimentation. Deep play and experimentation. It's always great to take classes. There's so many amazing classes out there, including my own. And yet sometimes we just need to be willing to sit down at our journal, at our easel, and just play with paint, play with marks, look at different colors, different palettes. Notice, what are we attracted to? What feels fun? What feels hard? Where can you be more open to trying and experimenting? All right, let's get a little white on this one, and then I'm going to call these guys done. And I always consider it kind of done for now, right? Done for now, because I may come back later and decide, there's still something missing here, or they're not quite right, or I want to just sit and play with them a little bit. So we'll let those just dry a little bit. So here again, I have this lovely set of cards. Got my sticky surface. So these are words that I feel are going to help me live out my phrase of the year, which was compassionate action. So the last step to finish these off is I'm going to put them on a binder ring because I want to have them on my desk. I don't want them sort of flopping around. So I'm just going to sort of eyeball the center point. I'm not measuring this. Just using a little hole punch. You could do this with an awl or a nail or an ice pick or a skewer, anything sharp you had around if you didn't have a hole punch. I love these little tiny hole punches are a great thing to have in the studio. And so are binder clips, which you can get just at any office supply store. It's a great way to pull little stacks of art together like this. And my holes are mostly even. I can see some light through them. So I'm going to take these and just put them on here. If I were working with them and actually using them on a daily basis, I would probably take them back off the ring. But I want to store them on the ring just for ease, and so they're not floating around my desk. Knowing me, I would probably tie some ribbon and maybe some beads to this as well to just make it a little more festive and fancy. But there I have my set of words that I've created to guide me on this journey to compassionate action. So, what would I do with this deck once that I have created it? So, this morning, before I gathered with you, I just grabbed my journal and I literally just picked the first list or the first word that was on my list. But if I wanted to say, how can I be? So here's some of the questions that I asked myself. How can I be in compassionate action today? And I might just randomly shuffle these up, take a couple of deep breaths just to sit with the cards, ask the question just as you would with any other deck of oracle cards or tarot cards. And I would simply ask, how can I be in more compassionate action today? And I would just pick one of the cards. And this one is standing out to me. And so this is choice, which is so interesting. So this morning I did some journaling about openness and have definitely been indulging in some yummy holiday eating, which after a week of that, my body is like, we're not so happy with this. So what I journaled about this morning was, um, how does openness support me in taking compassionate action today? And so I wrote a lot about new ideas and new opportunity, but I also wrote about health. And this is so interesting that my focus and decision today is the most compassionate action today is to get back on to my normal, healthy eating regimen and routine. And that's a conscious choice. So we ordered pizza for dinner last night. It was delicious. Pizza isn't always the thing that makes me feel the best the next day, although I do feel pretty great today. So I know that I'm going to want to eat a lot more fruits and vegetables. I also made a beautiful lentil veggie soup yesterday. So when I think about every time I go to prepare a meal or to put something in my mouth, that I have a choice to eat something that's going to support me and make me feel good, as opposed to something that is not going to make me feel great. So this is just noticing how I can support my goal of compassionate action using this list of words, or this little beautiful mini deck of words here that I've created. But another way that we can use this is for creative inspiration. So again, I chose openness this morning. Oh, look, and there's openness right there. That was not a magic trick. You saw me shuffle the deck, but there. So I can use this again. My favorite visual journaling practices always start with writing. They always start with writing. And so this morning I wrote about compassionate action and openness to new ideas, to input, to feedback. And I thought about compassionate action in my business. I definitely need to sit down today, do some writing and some planning, which I'm really excited about all the things that are coming. And so I want to create a visual journal spread that is about openness, right? That's about openness. So as always, I did some writing first about what that means. I'm going to stick this down here a little bit so that lays a little bit flat. I can't believe that I am at the end of this journal, kind of crazy to think about when we commit to making art on a regular basis, that we can fill up so and make so much more art than we think we can, right? By committing to our own creative practice on a regular basis, whether it's writing or art making or note taking or mind mapping, like I shared yesterday. So when I'm thinking about openness, what am I thinking about? I'm thinking first, I just want to put some gesso down on this page to get these pages a little bit thicker. And this paper worked fine for this journal, and it was what I had on hand, but it definitely has not been my favorite paper for working on. So I'm just noticing that I would choose different paper next time. You can see how it just, it starts to curl up when it gets a little bit wet with that paint on there. And I'm feeling this idea of circles, right? Openness to opportunity feels like almost like bubbles, new ideas surfacing. And I need to be open to ideas, both ideas from myself and from others. So I'm going to hit this with my dryer and get it a little bit dry before I start to add some paint and marks. So let me go ahead and mute myself so you don't have to listen to that. All right, it's dry-ish. So welcome if you're here joining me live. Thank you for being here. I love having people come and play along. And please say good morning in the chat. Let me know that you're here, or if you are watching the replay, love for you to just let me know that you stopped by. So again, I'm feeling this sense of just bubbles And this idea of being open to new ideas, being open to new ideas, this feels really important. So, what would happen if I just came in here and drew a bunch of bubbles? So, I get pretty obsessed with circles anyway, and there's definitely an interconnectedness of ideas. But say good morning if you're here joining me live. All right, so we've got some bubbles going on this page that feel really fun. And now I'm going to start to think about colors. And I'm thinking, I want to continue to just stick the theme of this whole journal has been around primary colors. And what if I just stick with those primary colors? This is a fluorescent blue. Interesting. And I realize I left most of my paintbrushes on the other side of the room. I had a friend here in the studio came up to play for the day, which is always so fun to have people to create with. But let's see what happens with this very transparent blue. So it's good to notice when you're working with acrylics if colors are transparent or opaque, and some of them are kind of in between. So it can be a great idea when you get new paints to swatch them out and just pay attention to, are they transparent? Are they opaque? How do they layer and mix with other colors? And we also talked a little bit earlier about repetition being something that is important to think about. So you can see that I'm not creating a rainbow of every circle is a different color, but that I picked an odd number of circles to add this blue to. Just a little bit more of that off my brush. And I love that I can still see some of those words underneath. Just cleaning that brush off a little bit. So working with more translucent colors helps to create layers. Sometimes in your earliest layers, you really do want to be using some of the more opaque colors to create those base layers. And then just getting that brush clean and then nice and dry. I like working with a really dry brush, especially when you're working with acrylics and on a thinner paper. So it helps your paper from getting too wet. But your base layers, that's why gesso is such a great base layer because it's more opaque. And the more opaque layers are great on the bottom. And then you add transparent colors as you go. Not sure that's the right green. Let's get some bright grass green in here. And then that helps you create some really beautiful colors. So this is a Liquitex light green permanent, which you can see is still pretty transparent. And each different brand of paint actually has a guide on it to the level of transparency or opacity. So this one says it's opaque, but it's a fairly light green. And I'm putting it on in a thin layer. So I'm still getting a little bit of that transparency that I like. So much of my art has blues and greens in it, and sometimes I really do have to challenge myself to add some different colors to my palette, work with some different colors. I don't know what it is about bubbles and circles that feel so fun to create. And so these bubbles to me today are definitely representing openness, curiosity, letting ideas bounce around, letting those ideas bounce around and see what's going to inspire compassionate action. What's going to inspire compassionate action? It's often openness to ideas, input, feedback. So I'm playing with this idea of openness today, and then I'm going to come in with some of my favorite Azo Yellow Deep here. And I'm just working with that paint right out of the tube. When I'm working on canvas, I definitely love mixing colors, and I will play with that in my journal, but sometimes I need these pages to be just quick. I need to just get the color down on the page. And so it's okay to work with paint right out of the tube. And as you grow as an artist, you will definitely find yourself wanting to mix colors and really make colors that are your own. All right, so I think I want one more color. We definitely need our red representative on here. So I'm going to come in with some of this fluorescent pink. I have a bunch of paints that feel like they're just at the end of their life, and so it's good to kind of use some of those up, which can also challenge us to try new things or new combinations. This one's just a little bit dried out. And I love how all the bubbles are touching, right? So all these ideas are sort of bouncing around. They're not independent of each other. I started reading this wonderful book this morning called Inspired, all about the science and art of creativity. And he was talking about, there's really no independent ideas when we think about innovation and some of the world's greatest creations. They're usually an evolution of a lot of ideas from a lot of people. We get inspired by input and the things that we see out in the world. And so our openness to seeing new things, to new ideas, to feedback and input is the thing that really nourishes and supports us, right? And so the more opportunities we create to travel, even somewhere nearby, to go to a new museum, to see different things, right? Like all of this is just expands our creativity. I know that traveling for me definitely inspires creativity. And a lot of that pink on my brush, just cleaning that off on my paper up here. So I have a couple of different ways that I could go here with this idea of openness. Part of me wants to have some fun just adding pattern and Zentangle inside the squares. Part of me wants to just take a stencil and build the layers up from here and have them grow and expand and have this just be an underlayer. And I'm not 100% certain. And this actually is really fun the way it is. This feels like openness of ideas. And this is that place where sometimes it's so valuable to just let things sit, to not force them, to give yourself some time to figure out where you might want to go with this. And part of me wants to just keep playing and having fun. And I saw this stencil this morning and I grabbed it. So I'm wondering, maybe I'm going to bring in this stencil. Get some of my Payne's Gray here. And a nice clean makeup sponge. This is another one that's getting a little old and dried out, which means it's just kind of thick, which can be good or bad for stencils. My friend who was here yesterday said she always used to not enjoy playing with stencils because when she was a kid and her mom would have her, they would be making art together and playing with stencils that her mom was using a brush. And it's very hard to work with stencils and brushes. So, loving these patterns that this is creating, and this is still sort of openness and interconnectedness of ideas. Maybe that's why I was drawn to this stencil. And it can be very challenging if you think that you don't like stencils and you're trying to use a brush with them. It's really hard to keep the paint from bunching up underneath and to getting some of those neat edges to the stencils. These are very fun. Loving these little bubbles. And so just an inexpensive makeup sponge is a really great tool, helps that paint go on smoothly. And the trick, some more paint there, the trick to working with stencils is to not have too much paint on the end of that makeup sponge. So to really dab it in the paint and then dab it off a little bit. If your makeup sponge gets too goopy, what happens is that you end up getting too much paint underneath the edge of the stencil, which is what creates that bulky edges or messy stencil, especially if you're working with a really detailed design. This is pretty abstract, so I'm not worrying too much about where the paint is going. Get right over the edge of that page. And I'm trying not to cover up all my color underneath because I want to make sure that I can still see the color. And I might want to do some journaling in the center of some of these. Good morning, Yvonne. Welcome. Great to see you here. Creating a page all about openness this morning in my journal, just playing with colors and stencils. Still thinking about my word of the year, my phrase of the year, I guess, which is compassionate action. And how am I going to, one, remember that, and how am I going to live that, right? How am I really going to support and pay attention to the things that I'm doing in different areas of my life to make sure that I am making decisions that are compassionate, right? That I'm taking actions that really nourish and support me and others that I love and care for or influence as well. So I'm having some fun with this stencil here. And I love the interlocking of these circles. So they're really sort of resonant of the pattern that I started with the circles, and it's still that interconnectedness of ideas, right? The interconnectedness of ideas. So having some fun just adding color to this visual journaling page. I started with doing some journaling around how can openness support me in taking compassionate action. And so when you think about your word of the year, ask yourself, how are you going to live that, right? Like I had a friend here playing, her word of the year was enjoy. So we had fun really mind mapping and looking at what does that mean and how are you creating the time and space for that in all the areas of your life, in all the areas of your life. So when you think about your word of the year, it's more than just a word, right? It's usually an intention for how we want to live and go forward. Okay, this is feeling super fun. And maybe I feel like I want all my bubbles to have just a little bit of this stencil. And I want you to see that pages can be, visual journaling pages can be really simple. So again, this was sort of capturing the intention of openness. And so this feels like openness to opportunity, openness to ideas. And I don't have to do a lot more to this page to have this page feel complete. So, one of the things is just coming in. I talked about this when I was finishing up the deck of oracle cards as well. The fine tuning of adding these sort of little marks. And this is just a plain Papermate Inkjoy pen, which is my favorite pen for my morning journaling. It writes on any surface. It's actually great for drawing over the top of acrylics with. But I want to keep my circle shape going, so I'm just coming in and making those feel a little more complete and integrated with the rest of the design here. And I missed that one little circle there. Do I want to? I do. So sometimes you just have an idea. My daughter was complaining about this yesterday. So she was down here in the studio with my friend and I making a journal. And we were talking about creativity and making art and process. And she's like, I get so frustrated because I have a vision in my head and then I can't quite recreate that vision on paper. And it's a place where I hear people get really stuck. And it's what I love about visual journaling is that it really is just a space for play. I'm going to find my Poscas here again. And when we give ourselves permission to have a place just to play with paint and pattern and line and design, we don't take it so seriously. And so these pages for me are about experimentation, growth, learning more about myself as an artist, playing with, color, shape, contrast, exploring different palettes, learning how to create layers. I think, as a mixed media artist, one of the biggest challenges in the beginning was how to create beautiful layered looks because in the beginning I created a lot of mud, right? I created a lot of mud. I didn't know anything or I'd forgotten everything I'd learned in college art classes about color theory. And so I had to just really play and experiment and create a lot of mud before I started discovering what it is that I really love to create, how I love to create, how to just come in and create some magical layers. Some of that had to do with color theory, some of it had to do with experimentation and play, but mostly it had to do with patience, right? With patience, with really being patient and letting layers dry in between when I had, especially when, kids were still home and the kids were younger and I had limited time to create, I'd want to rush to get a spread like this finished. And that was such a disservice. I didn't think about drying them between, and I would just keep adding paint and layers, and things became quite messy. So this is a page that is about openness. So I love leaving little spaces in here and maybe even some affirmations. So I am open to new ideas. I love feedback, which is true. I always love getting constructive feedback. Part of being open is asking better questions, right? So ask better questions or get other people to ask us questions. And I find so often in my morning journaling that I spend a lot of time writing as many questions as anything else because when we're in the question of something, we're in curiosity, right? questions keep us in a state of curiosity, very much being in that sort of 3-year-old energy of asking ourselves why. Why does this matter? Why is this important to me? And so here I have this very simple, very messy page that is a reflection of how openness can support me in making better choices and taking compassionate action as I go forward into my day. And so this page, I did the writing earlier, so not counting the writing, this page took just about 20 minutes to create. So it didn't take very long at all. And simple pages like this allow us to play, to just put some color on page, to practice shapes. So I encourage you to create simple pages as well as the more complex pages that do take a long time to create. So today I finished off showing how I created a little mini oracle deck, if you will, or a sort of guiding, supportive deck to help me remember and live out my word of the year, which is compassionate action. And I put mandalas from our Mindful Patterns membership, which is our monthly membership all about mindfulness, creativity, and connection to self, to spirit, and to others, and how we can use simple meditative coloring practices to bring a lot more calm and relaxation into our lives. But I'm really excited, and I color a lot of these sacred circle designs, and so it's great to repurpose your art, right? It's great to repurpose your art and use it again. But now I have this wonderful little deck, and there's my little ring that I will keep on this little ring, and it will sit on my desk or on my table here to inspire my journaling and my art making. So I am a big fan of starting my day with writing, but I don't do a traditional morning pages style. Um, Yes, that is Blanca. That's exactly the name of the book. Matt, I think, Richtel. And I just started reading it this morning. I only read the first chapter, but I'm super excited and curious about where the journey's going to go. So now I have an inspirational deck to help me live out my word of the year and creative inspiration for my personal visual journaling practice. So, love where this is going to go. Look forward to continuing this practice and this process. I'll share more about it as the months go forward because I think it's so easy to create a word of the year and then forget. But I also want to take a moment to just pause and celebrate the completion of this end of year reflection journal that I started at the beginning of December. Each day was related to a particular end of year reflection question that I asked those. The entire list of questions is available in my Teachable classroom at minette.teachable.com. But it's amazing with just one little prompt, a little dedicated focus every morning, and I did this 4 days a week, not 7 days a week, allowed me to fill up this book that I created, and I did show how I created the journal. And I think this simple collaged page here ended up being so insightful and helping me figure out the direction that I'm going for 2023 personally and in my life. These words kind of fell onto the pages in exactly the right way. So there's so much openness, curiosity, lots of asking questions, like all the things. But the core of all of this is living creativity. So creativity is a daily practice for me, but also it's something that's very alive, that is within our grasp. And Richtel argues that that it's in our cells. like the neuroscience, the psychology, and the science of creativity shows that creativity lives within us. I'm really excited about the new year, wishing you a very happy new year as well. And again, pretty proud of this, journey that I went on with this journal and delighted to be finished with this project and starting to look at archetypes and myth and story as we go forward into 2023. So Happy New Year, my creative friends. Thank you for those of you that have stopped by live or to catch the replays, celebrating the end of the first month of Painting in Your PJs with Minette. Have a beautiful rest of your day. A very, very happy new year. I will be back next Monday, January 2nd, with an all new journal and an all new direction. Thank you so much.